The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days, and neither had Emma's exhaustion. She stood behind the counter of Morningside Café, watching the last drops of coffee drip into the pot that nobody would drink. Her reflection in the darkened window showed a woman who'd aged 5 years and 5 months, ever since her mother's diagnosis, ever since the medical bills started piling up like accusations on her kitchen table, ever since she'd stopped sleeping through the night. The cafe had been her dream once. Now it was a beautiful corpse she couldn't afford to bury. Emma glanced at the clock, 9:47 p.m. She'd already flipped the sign to closed 13 minutes ago, already counted the register twice, already wiped down tables that didn't need wiping just to delay the inevitable moment when she'd have to lock up and face another sleepless night of impossible decisions. Tomorrow, she'd scheduled a meeting with a real estate agent. The cafe would be listed by noon. Her dream, dissolved like sugar in bitter coffee. She was reaching for her coat when she heard a gentle knock on the glass door. Emma's first instinct was to ignore it. She was closed. Done. Finished. But something made her look up, and that's when she saw him, a man in an expensive suit that was somehow rumpled, like he'd been wearing it for days. His tie hung loose around his neck, and he was holding the hand of a little girl, maybe 6 years old, whose eyes were red from crying. Their eyes met through the glass, and Emma saw something she recognized, the same desperate exhaustion she saw in her own reflection every morning. She should have shaken her head. She should have pointed to the closed sign. Instead, she found herself walking to the door, her hand turning the lock before her brain could override her heart. "We're closed," she said softly, but she didn't close the door. "I know," the man said, his voice rough. "I saw the sign. But my daughter," he looked down at the little girl, who was shivering despite the warm evening. "She hasn't eaten since breakfast. She won't talk to anyone. We've been driving for hours, and this is the first place where she stopped crying and pointed. She saw your lights." Emma looked at the little girl, who was staring at the cafe's interior with something like hope in her eyes. "Please," the man said, and that single word carried the weight of someone who'd forgotten how to ask for help. "One last coffee. I'll pay whatever you want." Emma stepped aside. "Come in." She shouldn't have. She had exactly $43 to last until Friday. She had to be up at 6 to take her mother to chemotherapy. She had already decided to give up, to close this chapter and move on to whatever came next. But sometimes the heart makes decisions the head can't understand. "Sit anywhere," Emma said, flipping on the lights she'd just turned off. "I'll make fresh coffee." The man guided his daughter to a corner booth, the one by the window where Emma used to sit with her own father, back when he was alive, back when the world made sense. The little girl climbed into the seat and immediately pressed her face against the window, watching the rain. "I'm Marcus," the man said, extending his hand. Up close, Emma could see the dark circles under his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. "This is Sophie." "Emma." She shook his hand, surprised by how cold it was. "What can I get you?" "Coffee. Black. And for Sophie." He paused, looking at his daughter. "Do you have hot chocolate? I can make it happen." As Emma worked behind the counter, measuring coffee grounds and warming milk, she watched Marcus in the reflection of the espresso machine. He sat across from his daughter, not speaking, just being present. His phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket, but he ignored it. Something about the scene struck Emma as profoundly sad. "Rough day?" she asked, bringing over the drinks and a plate of pastries she'd been planning to take home. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Rough year." He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup like it was a lifeline. "I'm a CEO of a tech company. Successful by every measure that supposedly matters. But 3 months ago, my wife left. Just packed her bags and said she couldn't do it anymore. The pressure. The lifestyle. Sophie." Emma sat down across from them, something she'd normally never do. But this wasn't a normal night. "She hasn't spoken since," Marcus continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not a single word. The therapists say she's traumatized. They give me pamphlets and recommendations. But I can't reach her. I'm her father, and I can't reach my own daughter." Sophie sipped her hot chocolate, still staring out the window. "So tonight, I canceled all my meetings. Turned off my computer. And I asked Sophie what she wanted to do. She couldn't tell me, obviously. But she took my hand and led me to the car. We've been driving for 4 hours. She'd point, I'd turn. Until we ended up here. Emma felt tears burning behind her eyes. I was about to close forever, she heard herself say. Tomorrow, I'm listing this place. My mom has stage 3 cancer. The treatments are, her voice broke. I can't afford to keep dreaming. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and in that moment, two strangers recognized each other's pain. What's your mom's name? He asked. Catherine. Everyone calls her Cat. Tell me about her. And Emma did. She talked about her mother's laugh, about how she'd helped Emma bake the first batch of scones for the cafe's opening day, about how she still called every morning to ask if Emma had eaten breakfast. She talked about dreams and fear and the impossible choice between giving up and going broke. While she talked, something remarkable happened. Sophie turned away from the window. She was listening. My daddy doesn't laugh anymore, Sophie said suddenly, her small voice cutting through the cafe like a bell. Everyone froze. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Sophie. Baby. I thought if we drove far enough, we might find where mommy left his laugh, Sophie continued, looking at Emma with those wise, sad eyes. But I think maybe she took yours too. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. She started crying, the kind of crying she'd been holding back for months. Oh, sweetheart, Emma said, reaching across the table to take Sophie's small hand. Sometimes grown-ups lose things. But you know what? Sometimes we find new things. Better things. Marcus was crying now too, pulling his daughter into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. They stayed like that for a long moment while Emma quietly made more hot chocolate, more coffee, and brought out every pastry she had left. The three of them sat in that booth, eating and talking as the rain finally stopped and the stars came out. Don't close the cafe, Marcus said finally. Please. I can't afford not to. What if you could? He pulled out his phone, typing quickly. I have a foundation. It funds small businesses, especially those run by families facing medical hardship. Let me help. Let me do something that matters. Emma shook her head. I can't accept charity. It's not charity. It's investment. In humanity. In moments like this. He gestured around the cafe. You gave us sanctuary when you had every reason to turn us away. You gave my daughter her voice back. Let me give you your dream back. 3 months later, Emma stood in Morningside Cafe during the grand reopening. Her mother sat at the corner booth, weak but smiling, cancer-free. Marcus and Sophie came every Tuesday evening, their standing reservation at that same booth. Sophie had started drawing pictures of the cafe, of Emma, of her father laughing again. Sometimes one cup of coffee can't save the world. But sometimes it can save the people in front of you, and that's where all saving begins. Emma learned that the opposite of despair isn't hope, it's connection. Two broken families found each other on a rainy night in an almost closed cafe, and in choosing to be human when it was hardest, they discovered that kindness isn't about having enough. It's about giving anyway, even when, especially when, you have nothing left. The sign in the window now read, "Open late for those who need it most." Because Emma finally understood, we're never really closed when someone needs light in the darkness.